Hey everybody, just gonna give it about another minute just to make sure everyone's had a chance to trickle in, and we can get started on this workshop. While we're waiting for some more people, just want to point out, if you have a question, feel free to post that into the question and answer section. I'll be checking that a little bit later. I had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so I've only got one screen to work with, so forgive me if I'm moving around a little bit on the thing. This is going to be a fairly hands-on workshop. We're going to do some live coding and hopefully get, a cool integration going between Gatsby, Contentful, kind of see how that round trip works. I'm just going to give it about another 30 seconds because I see there's a few more people joining, and then I'll get started. All right, let's get started. So my name is David Fateh, and I'm a senior software engineer and developer advocate at Contentful. I'm kind of doing my slides a little bit out of order. I've got that on my next slide. But anyways, this presentation is actually going to be more of a workshop. We're going to look at downloading the Gatsby default starter. We're going to see how that runs real quickly. I'm sure everyone's fairly familiar with that, but for those of you that aren't, we're going to look at that. And we're also going to take a look at how you can hook that up with Contentful. So I'm going to go over a little bit about what Contentful is and how it works. So again, for those of you that are just joining, name is David Fateh. And we're going to talk about, what is Contentful? How does it relate to Gatsby? How do the two come together and work together? And, how can I get started building a proof of concept or a marketing website or a landing page? Really, the options are kind of, endless when it comes to what you can build with this. And I'll talk about the more advanced use cases kind of towards the end of the workshop. We're just going to look at a very simple integration where, we start things up and we get things hooked up to the data source and we're able to start pulling data. And then from there, we, of course, can, just start to build our proof of concept or our website. So let me go ahead here and I'm going to just switch over to showing my full screen so we can take a look at my browser and also take a look at my terminal as I kind of work through some of these features. And I'm going to, sorry about that. Okay, get started. So what is Contentful? Let's see here. So Contentful is a content management system, and it's really easy to set up. For those of you that are first-time users, it's completely free, especially to try out and get working with something like this Gatsby starter. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to use Gatsby's default starter. This is from their GitHub page. I've already gone ahead and installed this to save a little bit of time, but I just followed the quick start guide instructions here. I just copy and paste this command. This created my build folder, and then we can run a command to actually get this up and running. So what that means, again, is if I'm in my terminal, I've got my Gatsby default starter here up and running. So I'm just going to npm run start that, and I'm going to let it start to take off. And while it's taking off, I'm just going to quickly go over exactly what we've got here. So in my editor, I've got the Gatsby default starter project opened up. And I just want to point out a few things that the starter project adds. So first of all, it creates a front-end JavaScript application here with a package.json. And of course, I've got all my dependencies here, as well as my build scripts and things like that. We're not really going to touch this today. I think the only thing we're going to do is install a quick Contentful dependency, but we'll get to that in a second. The other thing I want to point out about this starter is it sets you up with a bit of a component hierarchy here. So we've got some different layouts here. This is done in React. So out of the box, I've got some, SEO header stuff, some layout, page layout stuff. And on here, I've actually got my Gatsby pages. So for example, my index page here is actually going to be the home page, the page that I land on. So what that looks like, if I go back to my terminal here, you can see that the Gatsby process is kind of done building. And it's telling me that I can view my starter on localhost port 8000. And I've also got a GraphQL browser too, which is really cool. We're going to dive into that as well and just look at how we can get data from Contentful using GraphQL. But first of all, let me open up this default starter. And you can see here, this is just a classic default starter. It's just a landing page with some links to different pages. And this is where Contentful comes into play, because Contentful is going to be our content management system. And I'm going to show how, what we want to do is create, in this case, let's create a custom blog, just a small mini blog to kind of showcase how now that we've got, a Gatsby starter up and running, it's built a website for us. It's kind of done all of the boilerplate logic. I've got my React components and my build process. So really all I need to do now is start adding content in. So let's jump back to Contentful and quickly talk about, what Contentful is here. It's the content management system that's going to run with Gatsby. And I think what's really nice about, what developers really like about Contentful is it was built by a developer. So kind of the way we reason about the content structure is a lot similar to the way you'd reason about classes or JSON objects or things like that. So what I mean by that is when you first create a Contentful space, you're presented with this welcome screen. And up here in the top menu bar, there's different options to start editing and adding content. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the content model. And the content model is Contentful's way of describing, hey, what are all of our classes? What are all of our data structures? What are the things that the editors that use Contentful are actually going to be interacting with? And how is the data going to be laid out? So in this case, I've set up a demo blog here. And what I've done is I've created two different content types. Again, these are simply just, you can think about them like objects or classes in programming terms. So let me actually dive into the first content type I've created, which is the author content type. And as you can see here, what I've done is I've created a couple of properties on this author content type class, or the content type in general. So I've got a name and I've got a picture for a headshot, let's say. And if I wanted to add more information to an author, say a link to their bio or something like that, all I would need to do is add a new field to this author content type. Let's call it a text field. We'll make it a short text field, and I'll just call this the URL field. And let's create that, and I'll save that. Okay, so I think we need to put 2 and 2 together here and look and see what that actually means. So over in content, now this is where editors actually come in and input content that actually gets sent over to our website. As you can see here, I've created myself an author class. I have a name, I have a headshot, and this newly created field I just did, which is the URL field, and I could put in really anything I want here. I'll just put in my GitHub, for example. But this, this is how we start to create content. So the way I've reasoned about creating this simple blog is I have a combination of authors and posts. Let me just quickly go back to the content model here and just, again, show you I've got authors and posts set up. And if we quickly take a look at posts, A post has a title, a slug, some content, an excerpt, a cover image. And so what does that look like again when we actually fill it in with information? Let's look at my first post here. So I've got a first post title. It has a slug. We've got a rich text field editor where I can add images. I can do any kind of text editing I want here, make the text bold, change the headings, things like that. And actually what we'll do is we'll add this blog post into our Gatsby site in just a little bit, and we'll get to see how we actually are adding the rich text markup. So we're going to get HTML out of this, and it's actually going to show some styled content. And of course, here are my other fields. Again, I apologize because I only have the one screen. So if people are asking questions, I will try to get to them towards the end. I'm not going to be able to look at the question answer just yet. So sorry if there's people already asking questions. Again, I'll try to answer those at the end. Okay. So again, I've got a very simple setup here. I have one author, which is myself, and 2 blog posts. Now, again, I just want to kind of touch on the fact that, this is just a bit of a contrived example, but as you can imagine, if you want to run a serious blog or say a marketplace, a marketing website with a lot of products or things like that, you would scale this out. So you'd have different kinds of content types for products, blog posts, any kind of references. So if things reference each other, you can do things like that. I think that's what makes Contentful very powerful. And although my example today kind of looks, similar to maybe a WordPress WordPress experience where we just have a blog post editor, you can imagine that these pages are fully customizable, and we can even add in custom components, which I will talk about at the very end. That's called our app framework. And I'll actually show you an example app. We have a Gatsby app that will plug into this whole cycle here. But for those of you that are interested in trying out Contentful, but you think you want a lot of customization in your editor, more than what I'm showing you today, that's definitely possible. And I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. Anyways, let's get back to our quick Gatsby starter here. So I've got my default starter, and it's running on localhost 8000. And what I want to do is I want to just check and see that it's actually, let's do some live coding real quick. So I'm going to go back into my editor here, and let's just change this really quickly to say folks, to say hi folks on the main page. I'm editing the main page here. And if I go back to my web browser, we can see that that changes. So Gatsby has me all set up with live reloading and all that fun stuff. So I think what I want to do today, just as an example, is have these links actually go to my different blog posts. So right now, these are just going to the demo page links. I don't really want that. I want to start setting up a homepage where my blog posts show up. And then when I click on the link to my blog post, it actually goes to the post page. So let's talk about what it takes to actually get Contentful to start working inside of Gatsby. So first things first, back in the code, I'm going to install the Gatsby source Contentful plugin. Now I've already done this, before this workshop, just because I wanted to save a little bit of time. But this would be a simple npm install. So in the terminal here, we would just do a quick npm install, and it would install a feature that allows us to actually start importing GraphQL data into our Gatsby website. So what I mean by that is once we've got the Gatsby source Contentful plugin installed, I'm going to go over to my Gatsby config here, which is a configuration file that's built for me out of the box from the Gatsby starter. And this Gatsby config has a bunch of metadata about my site. And this is also where the plugins show up. So Gatsby allows for a crazy amount of different plugins. And of course, one of them is the Contentful plugin. And what I've got here is the Contentful plugin. Okay, this is asking me to restart. Sure thing. Sorry about that. So what it's got here is the Contentful plugin. And the options for my Contentful plugin are fairly straightforward. Now, there's a bunch of other options. If you read the documentation, there's a few different customizations you can make here. But for today, since we simply just want to read data from my Contentful space, I'm just going to give it my space ID, which is something I can easily find in Contentful. as well as an access token, which is something I generated inside of Contentful. So really quickly, if we're looking back at my Contentful space, and I want to just show you where I generated this API token, if I go to my settings here, and I go to API keys, you can see that I've got an API key here that I used the space ID from, and of course, I also copied over this API delivery token. And the delivery token is simply just a token that allows Gatsby to start pulling the data from Contentful, which we're going to start doing in just a second. So now that my Gatsby site has rebuilt, I want to actually go and check out this GraphQL thing that Gatsby has to offer. So this is a really cool feature. If I open up the GraphQL query viewer, we can see we've got a little playground here where we can check out, what GraphQL queries I can make. And what I want to do actually is I want to start querying for the titles of my blog post. So back in Contentful, what that means here is if I've got two blog posts here, the first one's called first post and the second post, I want these to start showing up on this list here. So I want to get rid of page 2 and using TypeScript and all that stuff. I just want it to say first post and second post, and I want those to be links to the pages. So in the GraphQL Explorer, now that I've got it hooked up to Contentful using the Contentful plugin, what happens is I've got a whole bunch of new Contentful options here in my GraphQL Explorer. So I think what I want to do is let's take a look at all Contentful posts. And let's look at nodes. I think it's under nodes. Yep. So I want to get the title of each post. And let's get the slug too, because we're going to start building URLs based on slugs. So let's play out that query and see what I get. All right, cool. So this is just a preview. For those of you that are unfamiliar, I'm basically querying my Contentful space now. It was really that simple. I just had to add that Gatsby plugin and add my API key, and all of a sudden I can start to query my Contentful stuff. So I've got my first post and my second post coming from Contentful. And now what I need to do is update my code to actually start showing this stuff. So let's take a look back in the code here. And I'm going to just open the browser tree, make sure we're in the right spot. So in the pages section over here in my Gatsby starter, I want to go to the index page, and I want to actually start pulling data into this index page. Now I'm going to kind of do it in a bit of a naive way. I'm just going to take a look here at the SEO page to see how it queries data from GraphQL. And I can see that it's using this static query. There's some static query tools, some GraphQL tools provided by Gatsby. So let me quickly grab that and import that into my index page. And you know what? I'm kind of a bit lazy, so I'm also going to just copy all of this stuff too. And it looks like what you do is in your React component, you simply have a function that, we'll have a function that queries the GraphQL. And I'm just going to paste that in here into my index page. And it's yelling at me because this needs to be an actual function instead of returning right away. So let's pull this in here. Sorry, those of you that are unfamiliar with React, I'm just kind of doing a little bit of cleanup here on the React side of things. And I'm pushing the code into a bracket function here so I can just add some more code instead of simply returning the layout. Okay, so what I've got is a static query calling GraphQL. Now this is calling the site metadata. I don't want to get the site metadata here. I want to get my posts, right? Because what I want to do is I want to go down here and I want to change these hard-coded links. Remember, these were the links that showed up on that starter website. So I want to get rid of these and actually replace them with the content from Contentful. So what's really cool about this GraphQL playground is I can actually just copy and paste this right here. I can copy and paste this query. And I'm going to replace this query here with what I just copy and pasted. And the other thing I want to understand is GraphQL is going to return a variable called the name of the query. So in this case, it's all contentful post. So since this is destructuring, I just want to change this to be called all contentful post as the variable name inside of JavaScript. And what we're going to do, kind of cool, is I'm going to add an inline debugger just to check to see if we've done this all correctly. So back in our website, let me try to make this a little bigger so everyone can see what I'm doing here. I hit refresh. See, I've hit my debugger inside of our component here. And I just want to hover over this to see if I've actually queried the content correctly. And it looks like I have, because what I see is this variable is actually defined. And if I dive into it, it looks like there's nodes. And look at that. We've got contentful data already coming into my Gatsby site. So I've got a title and a slug to work with. And that is within the nodes object. So let's go back into the code and rethink how we're going to build all of these links. So in React syntax, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call all contentful post. I'm going to grab all of the nodes, and for each node, I'm going to map over those nodes. And let's create a link. And the link is going to have a key. Let's make the key be the node.slug. This is just a React formality to make sure that React can properly reconcile the different links within this mapped array. And I want these links to actually go to a specific place. So in here, I'm going to create a template string, put a slash in front of it, and then in my template, I want to go to the slug as well. So this should hopefully construct a link that starts going to a slug. And the name of these links is simply just going to be the node.title. So assuming I've done everything correctly, let's just comment out the built-in or the default links that showed up with our project and see if I can actually start adding dynamic data here. So let me remove the debugger so we're not tied to it anymore. Awesome. So it looks like now I've got my first and second post, and it looks like I messed up just a little bit. I probably should have put a line break between these two. So let's quickly do that to just clean things up a little bit. So I'm going to need a fragment here just because I'm putting two links together. And there we go, fixed. Okay, cool. So I've got a Gatsby starter that's already got contentful data coming into it. And as we can see here, if I click on one of these, well, it's broken. I haven't set up these pages yet, but if we look at the URL, I'm sorry if this is a little hard to see, I'll just say what it is. It's localhost 8000 / first post. So this is the slug from Contentful that we imported. And so Contentful actually is now in control a little bit of our URL pattern, which is kind of cool, especially for when we're building blog posts and we want to dynamically build the URLs of different blog posts based on likely the blog post title in this case. So far, so good. We've got a query from Contentful that gave us all of the information we needed. And we were able to populate our homepage here. Let me go back to our homepage. We were able to populate our homepage with some actual content from Contentful. So I think the next thing we want to do here is we want to start building dynamic pages using Gatsby based off of the data that we grab from Contentful. And what I mean by that is we actually want to start grabbing all of the blog posts and all of the information in the blog posts. So let me go back to my post query here. And I think I want to actually build it out a little bit more. So I actually want the content as well. I want the raw content. Let's look at what that looks like. Okay, perfect. So this looks a little funky. The raw content is a JSON. It's a stringified JSON object. And that's because if I go back into Contentful and I look at my first post here, we can see that the content field has a rich text editor where the text is, this is my first post that I'm writing. And if I go back and I look here, let me try to zoom in here if this works. I don't want to make this too distorted. But you can see that here, this is my first post that I'm writing is hidden in this stringified JSON. What we're going to do is we're going to use Contentful's Markdown renderer to change this to pretty HTML and actually get it to work. So a couple things we want to do. We want to have this actually go somewhere. So when I click on my post, I actually want it to show up. And I want these pages to be built dynamically using the dynamic static generation that Gatsby has to offer. So back in my templates here, I want to look into the DSG template. So this is, again, something that came with the starter that just gives you a little pointers on how to start using a DSG template. And DSG stands for Dynamic Static Generation. So what this means is we're going to query Contentful for every post, and then for every post, we're going to dynamically build out a page. So what that means is in the end, when I get props from this React component here, what I eventually want to do is allow for my title of the page to be something like props.node.title, something along these lines. I think we're going to have to fill that in a second. But I basically want to create a new page for every blog post we have. So I'm going to go over to the Gatsby node configuration file here. And in this file, this is how we create pages in Gatsby dynamically. Now, some of you may be familiar with this. For those that are not, I'm just going to quickly explain that what happens here is the create page function will actually create a new path on your website based on the path that you provided. So in this case, my website currently has a /using_DSG page. So just to confirm that, if I actually manually go to this page using DSG, you can see this page actually shows up. So what we want to do is we want to start creating our blog posts using this dynamic static generation. And the component that we're using is in source templates using DSG. So that's the component we were just looking at. And last but not least, I do want to start passing in some context. I'm going to create a data object here. And what we really want to do is we want to pass in the node for each page. And the node here being, if you'll remember from when I was working on the main page, nodes just contain the title, the slug, and now that I've updated the query, they're going to contain the content as well. So what I need to do is something similar to what we did before, which was in my GraphQL query, I'm just going to copy this query here. And I think I'll make a disclaimer that for the sake of time, I'm actually adding this in like such. However, you may want to organize your queries a little bit more. I mean, there's a ton of options for organizing your code here. I'm just putting queries into this file for now, but you definitely want to probably think about organizing the queries a little bit more. Okay, so let's create a new data object here, and we're going to await a GraphQL query. And I believe this query is going to take a string, and that string is going to be the query that we used, that we played around with in our GraphQL playground. And if we remember from last time, this function, GraphQL, does return the name of the data object. So in this case, if let's actually get rid of data here and just deconstruct to saying all contentful posts, I think would be appropriate here. So I'm just going to paste that in there. And again, let's actually console log this out and see if we actually get any data from this. And once we figure out that we've gotten data from this, we're going to start adding it into our template. So let's go over to our build process. And we can see it's currently working. It's trying to build some things. Oh, got some errors. I think I just made a quick mistake here. We just want to have this inside of a query object here. And let's rebuild that. You know what? I'm going to stop the build process here and start it again just to clean things up a little bit. I think with my console log, hopefully we can start to see this in progress. And since we're kind of running, we're getting a little low on time here, what I'm going to do is, I might just switch over to a pre-created commit that I've got that shows exactly what I'm doing. I just want to kind of speed things up a little bit because this is a few problems. And then I'm going to move over to showing the Gatsby app, and then we'll take some questions. So again, I'm just waiting for the build process here to see if we've got any data showing up. And what I want to do is I just want to see if a console logs out into this build process. I just want to make sure we've got the right data object showing up. Great, okay. Few errors. I think I'm just going to switch over real quick just so we get the idea. I don't want to waste too much time. Live coding can always be a little bit of a problem. All right, let's take a look at what we've got here. Okay, so again, just to go over what we've got the GraphQL call here, and the data object should show up. There it is. It's showing up in our build process, so all the Contentful posts are showing up. And what I've done is once I get the data object, I'm actually passing in the node of the data object into each call to the create page. So again, we have to remember that all Contentful posts actually returns nodes. So this is an array of nodes, and each node is a Contentful post. It's a blog post that we made. And for each node, what I'm doing is I'm calling this create page function. And for each page, I'm dynamically creating a path. So I'm putting a / here, then I'm adding the slug in. I'm still using the DSG template, and I'm passing into context a data object that has the node in it. So let's look back at our DSG template and see what that looks like. So again, just to make sure that no one's a little too jarred, I did check out a commit that has a few changes in it. So this is slightly different from what we were looking at before. But let me talk about what the changes are that I've made. So this is still the same DSG template. What I've done is I've pulled page context from props. So again, this is just a props object, and I'm just grabbing the page context. And the reason why I'm grabbing page context is, again, back in Gatsby node, we're adding a context in, and this gets pulled into the component, this using DSG component as page context. And I'm just grabbing that data object that we constructed, and from in it, I'm grabbing the node. Now you'll remember in our GraphQL viewer, the node, the content had a raw property, and that was our stringified JSON object. So what I'm doing here is I'm parsing, JSON parsing that stringified JSON object. So I'm taking the node, the content, and the raw property, which is our markdown text, and I'm just turning that into a variable called body. So now this is going to be actual JSON. And the next thing I've done for the DSG here is I've changed the layout slightly. So for SEO purposes, the title in the browser window is now going to be the title of the blog post. The H1 tag is going to be the title of the blog post. And I've done something here, which is fairly straightforward. I've set some HTML into a div. And I've done this using document to HTML string. And you can see I'm passing in that JSON object from Contentful. Now, document to HTML string is a custom function which I've imported up here from a Contentful library. It's the rich text renderer. And what document to HTML string does is it takes our parsed JSON of the rich text field, and it understands exactly the properties inside of that object to be able to create actual markup. So it's going to create a string of HTML, and that is why I'm doing this React's dangerously set inner HTML, because document to HTML string actually produces markup here. So what does that look like back on our main site? Let's take a look here. So back on our main site, we're back on the home page here. And what I've got is, again, just my landing page, and I've got my first and my second post like we set up initially. But now, because of Gatsby's DSG, what I'm able to do is I was able to call that create page function. Again, let me just point that out one last time here. This create page function starts to dynamically create pages. I'm in a for each loop here. So for each node, or for each blog post, basically, I'm creating a new page in Gatsby. And what that means is now when I click on my first post, you can see my first post shows up here, and you can see this is the content coming from Contentful. So I've pretty much successfully set up a very small blog. Of course, the styling needs a little bit of work, and if I want to add images and things like that, I've got a lot of work ahead of me. But we kind of get an overview of how you can take, a simple Contentful space that was set up fairly quickly and start getting data into your Gatsby site. Now, this is not really all. So now that we've got a local development version of this, what I've done is I've committed this to GitHub. And let me open up my GitHub page here. Let's see if I can go to my default starter. So I've committed this code to GitHub, and I haven't really changed the README yet, which is kind of convenient because I actually want to deploy this site to Gatsby Cloud. So I'm just going to click on this button here. And Gatsby Cloud is going to ask me to configure a new site and all that. So I'm going to accept these options here. And when I do, I've got my site set up. And as you can see, Gatsby actually built this site when I committed it. So every time I commit to master or main in GitHub here, what happens is Gatsby will see that new commit. It will trigger a new build process. And I can actually go into the build process here and kind of look at some details of the build, so I can see what the build was. I can probably take a look at some build logs and things like that. It tells me the processes it went through. So this is just using Gatsby Cloud. And if I click Visit Build, I can see my website is up and running on a Gatsby hosted site here. So I've actually got a public preview that I could send out to stakeholders and things like that. And it works exactly like it was working on my main machine. So that's really cool. So I've got this pretty much from local. I've got a up and running proof of concept blog in just about 40 minutes. One last thing I want to touch on, and then I'll just quickly take some questions. I know we're kind of running out of time here, is I want to quickly add this Gatsby website back into Contentful. I kind of want to come full circle here. So back in Contentful, what I'm going to do is click on Apps up in the top bar and Manage Apps. And this is where all of my public apps are. So this is our app marketplace. And we have a lot of cool integrations in here. I suggest people go check it out. There's definitely a lot of services that are used. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the Gatsby Cloud app. So I'm just going to go through the process really quickly. And it's going to ask me for some settings, such as what is my content. There's a lot of different options here. I'm just going to keep it simple. And I'm going to add in my website. This is a link to my website right here. And I'm going to hit the install button. And back in my content model, I'm going to go to my blog post. I'm going to go to the sidebar customization. And here I've got my Gatsby app. Now I'm kind of breezing through this, so I apologize because we're just running a little bit out of time. But what I'm doing is I'm basically setting up an app to show up for editors for all of my blog post content. So now as an editor, when I come in to edit a blog post, I can actually edit some blog post, and then I see here on the sidebar, I've got a Gatsby app right here in my sidebar. And when I click it, it actually links out straight to my blog post. And it even knows the slug of my blog post. So it's super smart, and it goes straight to my website, hosted on Gatsby Cloud, and it goes exactly to the content that I'm looking for. So that's a super powerful tool for editors that are editing on the fly, and they want to see content in real time. And of course, in Contentful, there's a couple different stages. So you have your published content and you have your draft content. So you can set up preview URLs as well. So you can actually have different staging environments to show different portions or different segments of a site as it goes through the development process. Okay, I think just because of time, I'm going to just quickly look at the question and answer and see if we have any questions that I can go through here. Sorry, yes, I messed up on the DSG acronym. Okay, so it looks like we've got one question. How do you preview content and images for a blog post? Is there a preview in Contentful, or does it happen through Gatsby? So there's a few things here. In Contentful, we have a full media library where you can upload your content to. We also integrate with many different third-party media providers like Dropbox, Binder, things like that. And what you can do is you can just add it to Contentful, you can add it to your third parties, and that shows up inside of your content. And then we've got another question. Is a commit made when content is published? So there's a few things you can do here, especially in terms of the blog, but in terms of a lot of different websites. Contentful offers webhooks. So when you hit the big green publish button inside of Contentful, what you can do is you can actually have a webhook get sent out to your build service, whether that's Gatsby or something else, and you can have either a portion of your site rebuilt because you'll get exact information on exactly what's changed. So you can either rebuild a portion of your site, and Gatsby does allow for incremental builds, or you can just rebuild your entire website. So there's definitely different ways to get notified that an editor has published an entry. And of course, you can think about all the different use cases. If you want to update a Slack channel that something was published, you can do that too. Webhooks allow you to do all sorts of stuff like that. Cool. And I think there's a few more questions in the live chat. Sorry, I'm just going through it right now. Yes, I agree. I think the Gatsby and Contentful starter blog is a great way to learn. What I did here today was I took the default starter and I implemented Contentful into it. But one thing to note, if you go on Gatsby's marketplace there, they actually have a Contentful specific starter, which kind of does all the legwork that I just did out of the box. So you can get started right away. I just wanted to show an example of how quickly it is to start from scratch. But we've actually we've already fixed that problem already. So if you want to get started with Contentful and Gatsby, we do have starters that are more integrated, and they'll actually set up even more boilerplate code for you to be able to see or to be able to start coding a lot faster. Are there plugins to send new published content in a Mailchimp list? I don't believe we have a public plugin for that, but there's definitely a few different options. So you can definitely build a custom app to handle that. You can use webhooks like I described previously. Mailchimp, I think, allows for webhook integration, so they have different endpoints you can hit with different information. You can set up a custom webhook integration where your webhook hits maybe a Lambda or something like that, a serverless function that does some processing and then sends it over to Mailchimp. In a prod setting, how does the CMS, in a prod setting, how does the CMS serve requests from multiple servers? So I think that question is a little contextual. It definitely depends on your setup. What we see people doing is, in this case, they may put a caching layer in front of Contentful. So Contentful is kind of their source of truth, but they allow for content to be cached at a different layer, such as an S3 bucket or something along those lines. And then their website will actually pull from a different data source than Contentful. Contentful is set up to handle heavy traffic loads if you're querying Contentful directly, so you don't really need to worry about that from the Contentful point of view. I think that's it for all the questions. I hope I answered everyone's question. If not, head over to contentful.com/Slack, and you can join our Slack channel and ask questions. We have a great developer community there, people helping each other and figuring things out. And if you're a developer, head over to contentful.com/developers, and there's a lot of good resources there. And I just want to thank everybody here for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. And again, feel free to reach out to me on our community Slack if you have any questions. And definitely check out our developer community as well. Thanks, everyone. Bye.